freedom, and democracy. Today, America is much better prepared and a more vigilant nation than it was 10 years ago. The killing of Osama bin Laden earlier this year has also brought at least some small measure of justice to the thousands of families who lost loved ones to his senseless terrorism. It seems as though everyone knows someone, or knows someone who knows someone else, who is directly affected by the attacks. This has helped to preserve the basic humanity of those who died on 9/11 and prevents them from being just a large number, an abstraction. It's often said that memorials are not really for the dead, but for the living. It's an occasion to reaffirm life, the life of the one who is gone, and the value of life itself for all of us. And as difficult as it may be, it also reaffirms our faith in humanity that was not lost in the rubble at Ground Zero or at the Pentagon or in that field in Pennsylvania. It lives on with all those gathered here today. I want to end with a few lines from a poem. Back in 2002, President Bush asked the United States Poet Laureate Billy Collins to write a poem to mark the first anniversary of 9/11. And he was asked to read the poem at a special joint session of Congress in New York. The poem is called simply The Names. It's an elegy, a poem for the dead, a tribute to the individual victims of 9/11. He uses the alphabet, and for each letter he chooses one name to represent the other victims. Woven throughout the poem are brief, simple descriptions of ordinary images from everyday life, as if everyday life had continued. And here are the poem's final lines. These are the names of citizens, workers, mothers, and fathers, the bright-eyed daughter, the quick son, alphabet of names in a green field, names in a small tracts of birds, names lifted from a hat, balanced on the tip of the tongue, names wheeled into the dim warehouse of memory. So many names, there is barely room on the walls of the heart. So we gather here today with their names etched in the walls of our hearts. We gather to honor the citizens, the workers, the mothers and fathers, the firefighters, the police officers. We gather to honor the heroes. Although times may pass, let us always remember all whose lives were taken on that September day 10 years ago. Let us honor their memories by cherishing our country and the faith and the value that we share as Americans. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Klobuchar. It is now my honor and privilege to introduce to you a member of Minnesota's congressional delegation, happens to represent my district, Congressman John Klein. Thank you, Ed, one of my more famous constituents. It's a great pleasure to be here with you this morning on this very special occasion and to share this space with my friend and colleague, Senator Klobuchar, these wonderful men and women in uniform behind me who are serving us every day. And I can't help but notice these precious children here in front of me, children not yet born on that fateful day 10 years ago. 10 years ago, Americans got up and started the morning just like every other morning. Routine. I remember well, we've heard stories here, and I remember well starting to work on that morning, driving up to Minneapolis, and listening to the radio, and there was a strange story being reported. Remember that story? There was a little plane reported to have accidentally flown into the World Trade Center. And since I spent most of my life as a pilot in the Marines, and I was thinking like a pilot, and I thought, well, that is strange. I wonder how that could happen. I wonder what the weather was. What was air traffic control doing? It was an ordinary day with kind of a strange story. And then, of course, the story changed, and the horror started to unfold. And I remember being with my fellow workers at Center of the American Experiment in downtown Minneapolis, and then watching, glued to the television, as all of you were, as the second plane flew into the second tower in the story continue to unfold. Well, each of us, except these children here in front of us, has a story that we remember, and those stories combined are part of the national identity of our great nation today, part of a national narrative. Some of the accounts that we've heard in the days leading up to today's ceremony on the news, as people are thinking back 10 years ago, some of those accounts are tragic. Some of them are inspiring. Many of them are dramatic. But again, they all tell a story. They're part of the fabric of our nation. Because it wasn't just New York City or Pennsylvania or Washington, D.C. and the Pentagon that was affected that day. It was all of us. It was America, and in fact, it was the world. Not too long after 9/11, there was a commission, the 9/11 Commission. It came out and reported to us what we knew, and it was that we were at war. We were at war with a brutal enemy. An enemy with names like Osama bin Laden, the late Osama bin Laden, Al-Qaeda, and Islamist extremists. And this was an enemy that would keep coming after us. They wanted to destroy our way of life and inflict theirs on the world. And we would have to be in this war for a long time because so much was at stake. And I'm reminded, I've got a quote here that I've used a number of times thinking about the war that we're in. John Stuart Mill, many years ago, said, "War is an ugly thing, but not the ugliest of all things. The decayed and degraded state of mind and patriotic feeling which thinks that nothing is worth war is much worse." War came to us, we're in it. And again, many years ago, responding to another enemy and another threat, President Kennedy put it so well. He said, "The path we have chosen for the present is full of hazards, as all paths are, but is the one most consistent with our character and courage as a nation. The cost of freedom is always high, but Americans have always paid it. And one path we shall never choose, and that is the path of surrender or submission." So that's part of the legacy of 9/11/2001. We've heard speakers already today talk about first responders, the increased preparation, the changes in our intelligence community, the increased vigilance. That's part of the legacy of the attacks of 9/11. That's not the only legacy. In the book of Lamentations, the prophet says, "Yet this I call to mind, and therefore I have hope. Because of the Lord's great love, we are not consumed, for his compassions never fail. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness." That's another legacy of that day. Millions of Americans turned to God in grief and anger and sometimes despair. We have always turned to God. His unfailing love is motivational to us. It's inspiring to us. And it should inspire us to come together and work together. You probably remember, and I'm reminded, and I'm sure Senator Klobuchar is, and our colleagues who were serving in Congress on that day, how members of Congress came together on the steps of the Capitol in unity and sang. In recent years, it is argued that that spirit of unity has faded, but I would say it is not lost. Senator Klobuchar and I today are proud to be here together, Democrat and Republican, Americans, to remember this day.